What drives winning? What allows teams to win championships? But not just one championship, teams that win year after year. Follow me on this journey to talk with coaches all across the country to uncover what separates average teams versus champions. Hey, my name is Ryan Romano, and I'm your host here on the Championship Corner podcast. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to this week's episode of the Championship Corner. Holy shit, I'm excited about this one. I know for a lot of you guys that follow me on social media, I was hyping this one up, and I have to say that was very genuine, very real. I've got my good friend, Austin Milster, who I guess former Army Ranger is the appropriate, or Army Ranger and Division I athlete. And actually, very interesting enough, was like majored from West Point in leadership. And so I think the idea of preaching good leadership and good culture and how to create your identity, it's like, who better to have a conversation with than the legend himself. So yeah, man, appreciate you jumping on. Appreciate you joining me. And I'm excited for this.
Good to be here, man.
Yeah. All right. So I know we were talking a lot like before we hopped on, and, you know, one of the things that you talked about and resonates with me a lot, because I feel like it is the premise of like building strong culture, and that's like identity, right? Like that can be the group identity down to the individual's identity. And you mentioned something about essentially like not making the identity easy to get. Because obviously then if it's easy, then everybody can have that. There's that premise behind it. So I guess reflect back on me. It's like, how have you developed your own identity? Especially obviously from the military, where it's like, I feel like they kind of tell you what your identity is, and like moving forward, did that help you? Did that hurt you? Yeah.
Yeah. So we've known each other long enough, all the way back high school years. And I mean, it was pretty easy for me. I grew up in a household. It wasn't like athletics were the number one thing. But they were, it was emphasized as a kid. I grew up playing a little bit of everything. And so my mindset went to athletics.
Yeah.
And so I'd be a freshman in high school, and it would be March, and I considered myself a sophomore because the wrestling season had ended, and then March would be over, and it was like, okay, we're a sophomore already. And then sophomore year ends. The day of the state tournament, the sophomore year ended. Now I'm a junior, even though there's 3 or 4 months left in academic. So, as a kid, I would say as a teen, I was very centered around athletics.
Yeah.
And that can be a good or a bad thing, honestly. I mean, looking back, I kind of wish that I would have had a larger identity, and I'll probably can get to that here as I expand. But at the time, it kept me out of trouble. I mean,
For sure.
I tell people when I meet them, like, oh, did I know you from high school? I'm like, I don't know. Were you in the wrestling room? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, maybe not. Or I apologize. I might not remember you. But, at the end of the day, it was wrestling. Yeah, sure, keep your grades up in your academics. It was wrestling and wrestling. And so I wasn't very social. So, I mean, on the social aspect, I probably had a lot of work to do by the time I was an 18-year-old freshman in college, in my opinion, from the time the state tournament ended.
Yeah.
But so there was an aspect of there, and that's kind of what I would say maybe hurt a little bit, but it really did when you look at it. And you can get this, I think, out of any sport or really any activity if you go at it hard enough, if you want to be the best in the world at what you're doing. But especially for wrestling, because it's the nutrition, it's the weight cutting, it's the practice, it's the drilling of the moves. And other guys are like, hey, I've hit the same thing 1,000 times, I'm getting bored. And I'm like, all right, let's hit 1,000 more.
Yeah.
We want to hit this perfect. So that was kind of the identity going in to West Point. And, I probably got what I needed there, but it's not what I wanted. And essentially year one, just everything comes crashing down. I mean, academically, I was a straight A student in high school, and now I'm studying my balls off to get my C- and pass.
Yeah.
The weight cutting was more difficult because everything's more regimented. And you have to go sit at meals. Where in high school, I skip lunch. I'll go hang out in the locker room and eat a power bar and do my homework.
Yeah.
So there's really not as much free time anymore to do what you want. For me, it was wrestling and cutting weight and getting my stuff done. And, and then I get in the wrestling room and I'm just getting pounded, by these guys. And I'm like fourth string.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, wow, there's my outlet, but it's not really an outlet when I'm just going in and getting destroyed. So I really had to think and I had to just stop and say, well, who am I? What am I?
Mm-hmm.
Why am I here? Because, you know, my whole mentality in high school, even the little things, we were kind of talking about some of this offline, was just do the little things right.
Yeah.
Even if it's walking along and, I'm walking across the courtyard and there's a piece of trash, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm probably not going to pick up something completely gross, but hey, look, it's a bag of chips in my left. Nobody else is going to pick it up. I'll pick it up, throw it in the trash, the right thing to do. And I just really believed that doing even little things like that would shape everything else. If you get those little things right, it shapes everything else.
Yeah.
And, we talk about doing hard things. So I felt like, hey, I'm doing the hard thing. I'm doing the right thing. And then you get put in an environment where just it all crashes down and you really start figuring out what your identity looks like and how strong of an identity you've built. So, I mean, I felt like I had the right identity. It was athlete, champion, do the little things right. And then you get in an environment where all of that is just kind of taken away and challenged. And then you really have to stop and think. So I think that's where we were put in tough situations. We had tough coaches that gave us good workouts, and we you and I both, and lots of other guys, we would insert ourselves into the national tournaments as much as we could and go places and, find a wrestling club 2 hours away because that's where the best guys were going and college guys were in there. And you go knowing you're going to get beat on to get better. And then you go, 16 hours away where people are telling you what to do all the time. And
Yeah.
everybody there's, everybody's smart. You get somewhere and everybody's smarter than you. Everybody's a better athlete than you. I'm like, man, I didn't realize I was this bad at everything.
Right.
Or that there are this many people around me that are that good at everything. And so it really gets challenged and you have to stop and think, but that's kind of, you don't know what your identity is until you get to that point, until
Right.
you put yourself in that situation, and I think that, why I chose to go there. I mean, I wanted to wrestle so bad, if any Division I coach said, I'll give you a spot on the team and I'll waive your out of state fees and we'll say you're on scholarship and you have to wash my car every week. I'd be like, you want it waxed too?
Yeah.
Like that's kind of where it was, so and the military academies end up being some of my top options. I'm glad I did it. When I was 18 and 19, I wasn't glad I was doing it. And so I think when you're figuring those things out, when you're starting to build that identity, you don't always love it. Nobody loves when you're just getting beat on. Nobody loves when you're going through that, but you get to decide how you're going to let that develop you and change you. And for me, being younger, a little less experienced, when I started facing some of that stuff, like I'll be honest, like I did crack a little bit those first couple of years. And tough guy me, like you knew me best as a senior in high school when you were early on, and it was like, man, that guy's the man. He stays after and works out. And I remember guys would get in trouble. They came to practice late. They have to run sprints. I'd line up on the line with them and run the sprint, and I would go hard. Well, and I remember, Coach Rohr one time was like, you better beat him. I can't remember who it was. You better beat him. And the guy's like, oh, okay, well, maybe he's not going to run it hard. And I took off. And he was like, oh, dang, I got to catch this guy or I'm going to run even more. And
I think that's one of those things too, is like I look back on, like, now I'm a firm believer in like, tell the fucking truth. Right. And like, as I look back on my life, especially during that time, is how it probably immature is a good word, plus like not knowledgeable of like appreciating somebody like you in my presence. Like right now, how great would that be to like, the whole like proximity is power, to have those people around you that really try to push those boundaries over and over and over again. Like, right. Like you said, like once you got to West Point, it's like, oh, like I kind of became average again. Right. Like I stood out my entire high school career and here I am, like, I'm just a number again, right? Now, how do I stand out again? And so looking back on it, it's like how much of a fool I was, like trying to essentially distance myself from you, in essence, like of being your practice partner or something like that. Like, shit, but he's going to go so hard today. Like, I don't really know if I'm ready for this today. Right. Like, it's interesting, like looking back on it and like how much now it's like, that's what I try to get so many people to understand. Like, yeah, like it does suck, but like, you're going to really start to figure out like a completely new version of you. Right. Like, and essentially I assume that's kind of what you're saying with like, when you arrived at West Point, it was okay. Like now there's a better version of me. Now there's an upgraded version of me. And now I'm going to transform into something like I probably didn't even know that that was possible. And I want to ask too, it's like, at what point did you, like, at what point was being at West Point not enough? And then it
Yeah.
was like, oh shit, now I got to go be a Ranger, right? Like now I
Yeah.
got to upgrade again, so to speak.
Yeah. So just a side note there too, but finding practice partners was kind of hard to come by. And I always thought it was because I always thought it's because I did go hard, but you're like, all right. I mean, somebody has to go with you. So that's the thing.
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
you know, when you're in that boat, when you are that guy, call it that asshole that's just always going to go 100%, people aren't going to want to do it, but you have to drag somebody into it, and
Yeah.
you hope that it makes everybody around you better. Um, but then, like I said, you have to, and that's what we're talking about. You have to do hard things and put yourself in environments to get to that next level. And for me, I thought I was all set going up there, and then you start experiencing this stuff, and it was just like, really, I felt like I started pretty at the bottom in high school. Like
Mm-hmm.
but things came a little natural. It was a smaller step than the college, so it was like work hard. And wow, I went from fourth in the county tournament in middle school to working hard all spring, all summer to second in the state tournament, ninth grade. It doesn't happen that fast
Yeah.
in college. It doesn't happen that fast the bigger the step you get. So you start getting challenged. And for me, a turning point, honestly, it was spring of my second year. And this is kind of some leadership thing, I guess, but we were lifting and we were doing some kind of like grip thing. And, I'm starting to finally get myself back to where I wanted to be, where I thought I was when I walked in the door there. And we had to hang on to these. It's heavyweight. It was like 100-pound dumbbell or something. It was like hold it for whatever it was, a minute. And so I'm holding on to it, and there's a guy on each side of me. We're sitting on the bench, and I'm like, all right, I'm holding it longer. I'm holding it longer. And then finally, I'm straight up. I'm losing it, and I'm like, all right, I can't like let this thing roll on my buddy's toe. So I just kind of stand up with it. And when I did, the bench is straight, but then it has like the two supports that
Yeah.
stick out. Well, I had set that sucker right on top of the support, like with all that weight as I was standing up. I was like, all right, cool. And I was like, oh, my hand kind of hurts. And I looked down and like three of my fingers are just crushed. Like one of them was like the tip of the finger was like dangling off. And I was like, oh man, that's not good. And so my buddy's like, dude, what the hell? And it's like, this big old ordeal. Like, everybody's like mopping my blood up on the floor. And I remember like walking outside and like, I don't mind bleeding. Like if it's a cut, like whatever. But like when I'm bleeding hard, like I don't know, I lose it, man. Like, and so I start, like my head was spinning. Like I leaned against the wall, just kind of like sink down. I remember one of our heavyweights like, are you okay, man? I was like, yeah, I'm a face, And so anyway, we got up there and, you don't get a whole lot of sick call or hospital breaks or whatever at this point. You have to be pretty bad off. And I got like 2 or 3 days in the hospital. They had to surgically repair my fingers and my hand and all that. But it gave me it was the first time I really stopped in 2 years to think. It
Mm-hmm.
was just like, why am I here? Like I gripe and I complain all the time about how this place sucks and there's all these rules and there's all this stuff. But I chose to be here. Like it's not quite what I thought it might be. I knew there'd be a lot of rules and stuff, but you know, the hard part for me was you'd get a speech about how you're America's best and brightest, and then an hour later they're telling you like when you're supposed to go to bed. And I'm like,
Yeah.
like which one is it?
Yeah.
There's always an expectation, and that's something I tell people. I tell my own kids a lot of times, like you have to manage your expectations of things. And just because something didn't work out the way you wanted it to, you still have the choice in how you deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not deal with it well for 2 years, and it took literally getting my hand smashed. But you look at a situation like that, and everybody was like, "Man, I'm so sorry you crushed your hand," and I'm like, "That's pretty much like the best thing that could happen to me."
Yeah.
Because it finally got me to a spot where I'm sitting literally in a hospital room on an army base, and there's no homework, at least not in the immediate future. There's no papers to write. Like I'm sitting here with a hand that's all wrapped up, and I can just think about stuff. And so right there was kind of like, who am I? And like, why am I here and why am I doing this? And that was when I really made up my mind, like, well, it sounded good on the surface and I came here, I wanted to wrestle, and it's not what I thought it would be, but now I know what it is. And I have 2 more years. I could transfer out, which I had transfer paperwork on my desk for 2 years, or I can man up and I can stay here. This is what I came to do. And so I chose option number two, thankfully. And so, really things started to turn around for me academically and athletically. I know I had 2 years of experience by that point. I
Yeah.
kind of knew how things worked. I finally got into my major. A lot of our classes at the time, I think they've changed the academic program a little bit, but it was very heavy on mandatory classes and stuff I didn't belong in, physics and chemistry and Calc 1, Calc 2. And I'm like, man, I don't, I kind of thought I might do engineering up there. And I was like, nope. No, at least I spent 2 years getting my C minuses, realizing what I didn't need to be doing. But at the end of the day, it was a turning point. And I went back that summer. Still kind of had some doubts, but I went back that summer and got to do some cool things. We did like air assault school. I got to be a squad leader at the field training, and it's a world different when you're the one in charge of people. Your attitude shifts because you quit worrying about yourself so much. Those first 2 years, it was whiny baby me, even though I'd been the man in high school. Again, worlds different from that guy running sprints after practice to make somebody else better, make the
Yeah.
team better. Now I'm just worried about me. And it started becoming, hey, there's this whole squad of people I need to worry about. And it really is it's a perspective change. You start focusing in on, what do I need to be doing? How do I get myself right so everybody else sees what right looks like? And then how do I take care of them? And there's less time to be griping about how you're cold and wet and whatever else. So I had a good summer experience, and then I did what they call the affirmation, where I put my right hand up again and said, yeah, I'm locked in. So at that point, if I'd been kicked out of school, I'd owed them some army time and money and whatever else.
Yeah.
So it was in. And then, kind of fast forward to, when I decided I would go do Ranger School, I got branched artillery, because of, my stellar grades. It was like my fourth choice, at all the Army branches. I had infantry, armor, aviation, artillery. And so they're like, hey, congratulations. Like, yeah, okay, cool. Um, Congratulations on your fourth place finish, dude.
Yeah.
But, it's like, okay, well, how do we, by this point, my attitude's gotten better. I've shifted a little bit. I'm like, well, I'm not happy about that, but what are the good points? What can I do?
Right.
And it's still a combat arms branch. All the ones I put in for were combat arms branches. I call it getting brainwashed or whatever. But, you know, I looked at, well, what are the opportunities within being an artilleryman? And the branch rep at West Point, at every one of the Army branches, kind of has a rep that kind of, handles those guys and looks ahead at their first assignment and all. And a bunch of us wrestlers end up being field artillery. So FA, if I say that. It's like, hey, welcome to FA. I know there's a bunch of wrestlers in here. He was a lacrosse player at West Point. It's like, I know we got a lot of you wrestlers. You guys are tough. I got to tell you, you have the opportunity as an FA guy to do Ranger School, and I think that you all should do it. He's like, it's going to be the hardest damn thing you've ever done in your life. I know you go through some stuff. It's going to be the hardest thing you've done in your life. And I mean, to me, it was like the kid touching the stove. Yeah, every kid told not to touch the stove has to go
Yeah.
touch the
Yeah.
stove. And especially when it was compared to wrestling. I was like, I don't know. I've got a lot of weight. I've been through, good number of things in my wrestling career, and then doing it at West Point, you're already short on sleep, you're short on food, you're short on time. You know, I might as well try this out. So fast forward, I got to my first assignment. I was coaching at the prep school, so I did that for a handful of months, and then I got to the basic course for artillery. And day one, they're all like, "Hey, who wants to go out and try out for Ranger School? We have so many slots. It depends on the cycle. So this is literally, it's a tryout. You have to go through our program for this. I think it was like a 4 or 5 month course, and they're like, you have to go through our program. So we were doing our artillery
And then
studies and learning.
is that like a prerequisite, I guess?
Yeah, so like a lot of entry guys will get a Ranger School slot. I mean, it kind of goes with the territory.
Yeah.
And it's not that every guy gets to go through and gets to do it, gets to pass, whatever. But at the artillery school, they're like, sometimes we have 5 slots in your
Mm-hmm.
cycle. Sometimes we have 10. It's whatever the Army can afford to give us, because you're not infantry.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you will go do this if you want to, but we only have so many slots. So day one, they're like, here's the announcement. Everybody else did PT, physical training at like 6 or 6:30, whatever it was. And ours was like 05. You'll be here at 05 every day, and you're going to do super PT, and you're going to have to get through these different, different gate checks, kind of, you have to
Yeah.
get through this. And if you didn't make it, we're kicking you out, whatever. So it's kind of like you had to get through it first. And then depending on how many slots there were, you wanted to be the number one guy because what if there's only one slot?
Right. Did you know
And
how many slots there were?
we didn't know till the end.
Okay, interesting.
But I think so yeah, you could have done it. I mean, I suppose there's a chance that it'd be zero, but I don't think that's ever happened.
Yeah.
And so you kind of knew there was probably gonna be 5 or 10. I think we ended up with like 8. For 5 to 12, maybe somewhere around there. We ended up with 8. But when we started out, of course, there's all these guys out there, like 100-something guys. Like you would see,
Yeah.
hey, who wants to do whatever? I mean, it doesn't matter if it's the football team that everybody's trying out for or whatever.
Right.
And they put us through the first couple days were some of the best, honestly, because if you come in halfway in shape, you see all these guys, burping all over the ground and
Yeah.
like crapping their pants, and you go from 100 day 1 to 50 to 25, and I think there were like 13 or 14 that were still in it, by the end. And then we went off, and did the school, and again, out of the I think 8 of us that went, I want to say 5 of us. I don't know what happened to like the other 3. I think they didn't quite make it for various reasons. You have to pass a bunch of different tests at the actual school, but I think 4 or 5 of us went straight through. And usually, like, you can get recycled, and spend another time. So I mean, it was obviously the program worked when you can say that many guys went through and didn't even recycle, and so that's.
So I know you had mentioned, is this when you said like one of the first things that like you're asked to do is become like a platoon leader? Was that at this point, or was that like later down the road, like when you're actually in Ranger school? And like, what the hell are you asked to do, right? Like,
yeah. So I mean, the school's a little different. Like, when you're going through your commissioning source, like ROTC guys, West Point, whatever you're doing, they'll tell you that one of your first jobs is a lieutenant. It could be a lot of things, but like the primo job in your lieutenant years is being a platoon leader. And like kind of what we were talking about a little bit offline was the definition of a platoon leader is you are responsible for everything your platoon does or fails to do.
yeah.
And that kind of really hits again when you start talking, identity wise, like, okay, I have to account for what we do or don't do.
Yeah.
And you can try to run from that all you want, but at the end of the day, if you are successful, great. And if you fail the mission,
so what are some of the things, like what are the nitpicky things that you're in charge of, just out of curiosity? Because this is like leadership 101, because it's like I am responsible, like if it's, I'm making this up, but like making sure everybody brushed their teeth, everybody made their bed, right? Like the nitpicky shit. It's like, bro, like tell him to take care of himself. Don't brush his own damn teeth.
It's just about like that. Fortunately, we didn't have to worry about the teeth stuff. But
yeah.
Somebody's not there. Somebody doesn't show up on time. They look at you. Why is Private Jones not here? Like, hell, I don't know. He might be drunk. He might have been out all night. There's a lot of things that could happen, but I mean, literally, the definition is what it is, but like just gives more insight to it. You typically have your equipment, so you are signed off for everybody's night vision, their weapons, and all that kind of stuff. And you sub-hand receipt that by all means, because you don't, dude loses it. It's still you that somehow lost that, but like at least you're like, all right, this dude's paying for it, not me.
Yeah.
There's a lot of motor pool stuff. You're signed off to all the gear, you're training. So like, we had this kind of running joke, like a lot of the junior enlisted soldiers like, man, I need to be an officer. You make all this money. I'm like, well, for what you do, you're honestly, you're probably not making that much money. It's probably like being maybe a CEO of a nonprofit. Some of those folks do really well.
Yeah.
But if they were a CEO at, say, a privately held company, if you were doing all those things in the civilian world, you'd probably be doing a little better than you were getting paid by the military. And that's not knocking the pay. You get some benefits, housing allowances, stuff like that. But I'll give you an example. Like, we're going to a rifle range. Like, if you enlisted and you're a private, like, yeah, you get stuck with some of the crap jobs. But like, you show up in the right uniform in the right place at the right time, you're 90+% there. You just show up and do what you're told to do. And that range, what some of those guys wouldn't know is like, well, we had to call range control 3 months in advance and get the land. And then we had to make sure that we had the ammunition, and that has to be drawn at a certain time. And then you have to pick up all the brass because they weigh it before and after to make sure nobody's hauling off with some live ammo. And then you're keeping in track with the weather conditions. You have to make sure that all your additional range safeties have been certified and taken the test with the range control people. you get the vehicles ready, you get the fuel and all the supplies ready to go out there. So all the planning and everything that goes into that. And then you go to the range, and typically guys are, getting to shoot the targets or whatever it is and lighting it up. And you're like the guy up in the tower just calling out directions all day. Like, are you gonna go shoot? I'm like, man, that'd be awesome. But
Yeah.
probably not today. I
So
did
is
get
it
a time.
similar like when you get deployed too? Is there like one person and does it rotate or is it the same person? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, as a platoon leader, you have a platoon, and so that's
Mhm.
your platoon. You run that platoon with your platoon sergeant, and so that person is the guy that chose to not go commission, but he's probably been around for 15 plus years, and it's kind of a cool dynamic if you use those guys the right way. And when I say use them, like you listen to what they have to say
Right.
because they've been around, and there was some conflict. Tell me, I had a buddy I like walked past one time and they were having this discussion. My buddy was a peer, he was a platoon leader, and he's talking to one of the NCOs that was his platoon sergeant. And he's like, yeah, but I'm responsible for the platoon. So like I'm in charge. And what I say, that's what we're gonna do. And yeah, he's not wrong, but what I gathered was that maybe he hadn't quite listened to what the guy had to say. And so they were kind of in this argument. I kind of stopped, and backed up a few steps
Yeah.
and just kind of looked in the office. And the platoon sergeant's like, sir, you going to handle this guy or am I going to have to? I was like, I'll talk to him. He's like, all right. Oh, yeah, you got it. He's like, okay. And I was like, man, he's like, yeah, but I'm the PL. I was like, yes, you are. But man, like, you have to respect the fact that guy's been in for a long time and
Yeah.
at least listen to his opinion. And when you listen to what he has to say, if you disagree, that's fine. Give him a reason why you disagree. You don't have to go to the private who doesn't like what's happening and tell him why you're doing what you're doing. But when you have somebody that is you are in cahoots with, and that is your partner, whether you're the one in charge or not, you need to give that guy that courtesy,
Yeah.
and he'll tell you, well, I think it's a bad idea because of this, but a lot of times those guys, they'll let you fail, but if you've done it in the right way, they'll come back and say, hey, I know you thought you knew what was right. You gave me a reason. You at least gave me that courtesy.
Yeah.
I got your back, and that's just team dynamic kind of stuff, and I mean, I'll say, we were talking about the Ranger School. Like one of the biggest things there is that we would often say, and somebody quoted it at some point. I won't tell you who it was, but when in charge, be in charge. And what goes with that is when you're not in charge, you bust your butt for the guy that is. I mean, I
Yeah.
know that I scored some points with some peers because the way it works out there is you go through three phases. You have to pass your patrol, meaning that you've done the actual army stuff, the tactics and all that. You've done that well. You've done the leadership portion well. The guys on your team, even though you're tired and hungry, you've kept them engaged. You could walk up down to the guy at the lowest level that's just a machine gunner, and the ranger instructor, the RI, goes up and says, hey, what's the grid that we're about to assault? Like, what's the mission? What's the
Yeah.
objective?
Yeah.
What happens if I hit you with incoming? Where are you going with an artillery simulator? Like, I'm going 300 meters west because that's where we're going to meet. But you have, as the platoon leader, the patrol leader in that case, you have to have all that stuff planned out and lined up. And a lot of times you get like 20, 30 minutes to put it all together because they're like, all right, your turn to
Yeah.
lead. Boom.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you cover those things. And that kind of goes just no matter where you're leading, what's important to you. Everything can't be important. Like, hey,
Yeah.
did you know one of your guys didn't shave? I'm like, does he know where to go if we get hit with artillery? Which one's more important? I get
Yeah.
that shaving is important, but like at the end of the day, I actually got called out for that while I was the patrol leader one time. He's like, did you shave? I was like, no. The dude straight up, he was like, cussed me a couple times. Hey, that's bullshit. This is ridiculous. And I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah. He's like, well, what were you doing? I was like, I was putting together the plan. Like, which one comes first? Like, you couldn't shave while you did it. And I was like, well, I think I like ate a banana. Like, I had an opportunity to eat a banana while I did it. Like, again, which one's more important to me is I'm gonna eat banana instead of shave. Like, and I failed that patrol. I don't think it was just because I didn't shave, but it's a possibility,
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, like, what are you measuring and what's important to you? And that can go as a group thing and that can go as an individual, and that
So
was
here's an
something.
interesting question too, because I 100% believe like what gets measured is like what grows, right? Like what you're able to track, what you're able to measure, like those are the things that like you focus on. How did you guys, if any, or I guess like post-military as well, like, because the idea of like leadership and culture and some of those things, it's hard to measure those, right? So like, what are some of the underlining like principles, I guess, and it can be down to the individual level, right? Like
Yeah.
if you're like, if you're going through ranger school, like, I don't know what they're called, but like the guys putting you through school, it's like, how do they know
Yeah.
that like, hey, that guy's like great leader, or like he
Yeah.
really understands like how to build like his platoons like culture in terms of like they're very cohesive and things like that. How do you, or how did did you learn at that time to like be able to like track and measure those things?
Yeah. And first off, I have no idea. Like I have buddies that have since gone and been RIs, ranger instructors, and like
Yeah.
there's this formula. And like
Yeah.
I don't know what it looks like because it's I mean it's you could probably if you did some deep research, if I hit one of those guys up, half of them are already out of the army now, they might tell me, but like you would go through and you would get evaluated on your actual patrol. And that's
Mm-hmm.
to me, it's a little bit of a judgment call.
Right. Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
for sure.
and but then you would get peer eval. So if there's 10 guys in a squad, yeah, you would rate me and you were in a squad together with eight other guys or whatever. So there's 10 guys in there. You would have to rate everyone 1 through 9. And you cannot rate everyone 1. You can someone is the 9 and someone is the 1. And then they had some objective type questions like, would you go to combat with this person? Would you, want to be in a foxhole with this person? And then just stuff you could fill out. And I don't know how they assess that. I'm sure if you got 9 from everybody, like you're done. You got
Yeah.
recycled or kicked out. Like if you got recycled twice for peers, you're done. They would let you, if you got peered out one time, they would let you recycle that phase with a new group just to be like, hey, maybe they didn't like the
Right, right, right.
Now, I will say too that rarely are you like, you know what? Yeah, he has a big nose. I don't like it. More so, it's like he was a dirtbag and didn't help carry his weight, or he sucked as a
Mm-hmm.
leader, or when he only cared about when he was in charge, those kind of things. Um, but like, from a just a general perspective, I would even say whether it's, because let me use I guess one of the range school things. I failed a patrol. Um, we did our thing. We got moving, probably a little too slow. We did a changeover like halfway through the day. Like you're in charge now. You had a roster number. They called up my roster. I'm like, okay, where are we? We're in the middle of a swamp right now, and I was like, this is the mission. We're not going to get this. And then they came over the radio and changed the mission, thankfully. But it was like, okay, now it was like a down pilot mission. Where's that? So I'm sitting here like looking at the map. Like, all right, where do we need to go? And they're like, you're not moving fast enough. They start dropping the artillery simulators. We all start running. And it was just, all right, let's get everybody regrouped. Let's go toward this thing. And I remember like we got out on the road because I looked at the time, I looked at where this thing was. We had heavy packs. We've been sinking in the swamp like all day. And I'm like, let's get out on the road. Let's go. And the RI was like, I'm going to fail you for getting out on the road because it's not tactical. You're supposed to be moving quietly through the woods. I'm like, okay. And he's like, you're okay with that? I was like, I'm not okay with failing, but like, I'm going to fail this mission. I'm going to fail this patrol if we don't get the time.
Yeah.
So what is the most important thing right now? Because everything you treat it like a real world scenario. If there is a real pilot, are we going to take our time to tactically move through the woods, or are we going to get on the road and bust it to get in time? And so that's what we did. I sent one squad. We had 3 squads platoon. I sent one squad out front in case they caught the contact. They could radio us, and then the middle group meet up. There was one in the back just for rear security, same type thing. And I was running between the 3 squads, just hauling ass the whole way. So we get done, and the reason I failed, honestly, I think he never told me the exact reason, but I had us drop our packs and then go to the objective, like probably a couple football fields away, and we missed our time by like just literally a couple seconds. And if we hadn't dropped packs, we probably would have made it. And he's like, "Why'd you drop packs?" Like I felt like we would be able to assault the objective easier, whatever. He's like, "Well, how do you think you did?" Like, "Well, I think I failed." He's like, "Why do you think that?" I was like, "There was a time to meet. We didn't meet it." He's like, "Okay." He's like, "Well, I'll go ahead and tell you, yeah, you failed." And he said, "But," he said, your guys were motivated. They're going up and down the road. They were hauling ass. And he's like, "Why do you think that is?" It's like, I can't tell you. And he's like, "I think it's because you've had them motivated." He's like, "Your ass was running up and down there the whole time." It's like everybody's tired, but you're going in and checking on your guys. And I think from a leadership perspective, you have to have the mentality that you can't expect anybody to work any harder than what you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
And you look at, like, in high school, we were on the same team, so we can relate to this. Coach Rohr was up early. We were practicing early morning. We were practicing after school. He was encouraging us to get in and do things. Like, you can't have a successful group of people if you're not willing to do things that they're not doing. And that's kind of a cliche thing, but like, you show it more than you say it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I get up early and work out most mornings, and it's not because I still love getting up early, but I want my kids who are in first and third grade to see by the time they're waking up out of bed, dad's already showered up or working on getting showered because he's already been up for an hour and a half, working out, doing something.
Yeah.
And I can't say that's every single day. Sometimes I'm like, hey, I don't mind them seeing, hey, I took a day off to rest, and it's a holiday or whatever, and we rested and slept in a little bit. I'm debating that because I may still be like, hey, I'm up. It's a
Yeah.
holiday. It doesn't matter, especially as they get a little older. But, when you talk about what you measure, what does your effort look like? And that effort comes a lot of times from, do you care about what the mission is? Do you care about the end game and the result? Do you care about people? Do you care about the people you're with? Because, like, we've talked about this a little bit, but you deal a lot with coaches. You work with a lot of coaches, and there are a lot of great coaches out there because they know their craft, you
Right.
know, and they love the sport, and they loved it so much that they want to impart that wisdom. But at the end of the day, the mission is to make those players, those individuals better. And when the individuals get better, collectively, the team gets better. And if they really only care about that team success, they're in it for themselves to win those titles or those trophies. You're not going to have the passion to show up and do that the way you're
Right.
supposed to do it.
Yeah.
And you're not going to pour into people. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person. Maybe you just need to be a position coach. Maybe you just need to be an assistant. Maybe you need to be a camp clinician where you just show the techniques. You just show how to hit the baseball the right way, or how to take the right shot in wrestling, or you show the right form or whatever, get the right mindset, gymnastics. Doesn't matter the sport, doesn't matter if it's just business. If you're
Mm-hmm.
just there to make the money and you're not there to see the people grow and develop, and something that irks me in the civilian business world, a lot of times somebody leaves and people get mad. And I'm like, well, look, you should be happy that we've developed this person to have these opportunities. And if we don't have an opportunity to let them grow, we have to let them go.
Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
to let them go and be the best. And we should be happy at the fact that we got them to where they are. And you know what? Maybe they come back. Maybe they come back in a few years or in 20 years to run the place. But if we act like jerks, they're not going to want to come back. I'm like, well, thanks for all what you did. I guess you're going to see me out the door and on a bad note and sour this relationship. But when you're leading, organizations are about people.
Yeah.
When you lead people, you lead humans, and humans are going to behave how they want to behave. They have to make their own choices, but you're not leading robots. You're not leading things. You manage things, and that's another like cliche deal. But if you don't care about the success of those individuals and their development, then they're not going to get there. So what do you measure? How do people develop? And everybody could be a little bit different. Somebody may need something different than somebody else, but easy things to measure. Do people show up on time? Do they want to be here? What are the attitudes like? I know there's not a barometer to say how's the attitude, but you can survey your team and see, are
Yeah.
people with it? Are they engaged? Do they want to get better and see things happen? Do you have a couple leaders on your team that are staying after and running those sprints because that younger guy screwed up and showed up late or got in trouble? Like, do you have that? And if you don't, why not? Like, it's hard to say we're going to measure by the wins because things are going to happen. People are going to get injured. The stock market's going to crash. I mean, we had financial metrics we wanted to hit in 2020. Find a place that hit what they thought they're going to hit at the end of the year when they set the goal at the beginning of the year or even the end of 2019.
Yeah.
Things are going to happen, but can you measure the fact that, hey, we were able to keep everybody employed, everybody banded together, everybody decided to do even more, from home or whatever it was? Or do people just quit? Do people say, oh man, the world's tanking and this sucks?
Yeah, and I think too, it's interesting. Like, I was literally having a conversation with an athlete last night, and the premise of it too is like I'm in a unique situation because as how I led the conversation with is exactly what you're saying. And like, I love the position I get to be in because I can explain it in this way is like, I'm calling you, I'm having this conversation with you because I care, right? Like
Yep.
if I didn't care, like I initiated the conversation. Hey, can we connect later this evening? Right. Like if I didn't care, I just wouldn't have fucking said anything. Right. Like I wouldn't have texted. I wouldn't I could have just gone about my day.
Yeah.
Right. Like it doesn't
Right.
really matter. And I think on the flip side of that is it's showing people, I think that there's not an ulterior motive, right? Like it's easy to try to motivate people and say like, you're not about the money, but like when all, like you say, like all your actions point to like all they want to do is make all the money, right? Like, it's like, I don't really like subconsciously, I'm like, I don't really know how much they care about me. Or from the athletic perspective, right? It's, you only care about like improving the team's performance. Yes, ultimately that is your job. Your job is to win, especially in the college world, right? But their performance over a longer period of time is going to grow and like at minimum stay baseline of like where they were, not deteriorate, because like subconsciously it's like, oh no, like I'm going to do it because they care, right? To me, that's like the definition of unconditional love. It's like doing something for somebody expecting nothing in return. Like that's
Yeah.
in its most
Yeah.
simplistic form.
Well, and if you're leading a team, and when I say team, an organization, a team, a group, it doesn't, whatever you want to call it. At the end of the day, you have to believe in people. You have to believe that what you're pushing. I say BYOB. It's not bring your own beers. Believe your own BS, and you have to believe that
I
that,
love
that
that, by the way.
person.
I'm probably
Yeah,
stealing that.
yeah, do it, man. But it's you have to believe in that person in that group that they have the ability to get better and that they can get better, even if they don't see it. And that's the cliche thing. But here's what happens: people need to be believed in. When they're not believed in, they can shut down. And you say, well, that's a character flaw in them. Well, sure, right? And I'll go back where I was. I felt like entering high school, I had no sports accolades really, nothing really to hang my hat on. But I felt like I had coaches that believed that they saw this kid working hard. They believed that he was going to turn into something. And if I'm being honest with myself, it's not a knock on anybody, but I felt like by the time I hit college, it's like, oh yeah, there's this dude from Alabama, and yeah, he's won a couple titles in Alabama or whatever. But you wrestled in college, and everybody's kind of like, okay, everybody doubts you because you're not from a wrestling state. You don't have the Fargo title under your belt. Nobody knows much who you are, whatever. And again, character flaw, non-character flaw, whatever, thinking I had my identity all set, it affected me to kind of have that doubt going,
Yeah.
because then I start doubting myself, and I'm like, well, maybe I'm not as good as this guy that's from somewhere else that won one or didn't even win one, but I was told, oh yeah, he took fifth in PA. That's better than your 3 titles in Alabama. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but the point
Right.
is, what did I think? And you know to have people around you, teammates, coaches, leaders, bosses, managers, to not believe you, you have to know how to deal with that. And I didn't. And the way to deal with it is, well, I'll prove you wrong. That's
Mm-hmm.
fine. I'll go prove you wrong is the way to deal with it. But it took me 2 years of college and sulking in my own, well, nobody believes in me and this is hard, to realize some of that. But how much better when you have people around you that believe in what you can do. And we kind of talked about that a little bit, like believe your own BS. And the whole, like, I've said it before just offline, like leaders are vision setters, and they're dealers in hope. And I'm like, does hope come in a little plastic bag, like some drugs you're
Yeah.
getting? Is it fairy dust you throw on people, or is it telling people what they're capable of doing and what they're capable of being? And it doesn't have to be, this is the only way to do it, but it has to be, this is the way I know how, and I know you could be successful doing this, even if you put your own little flavor on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And I think too, like I always say, there's really 4 levels of belief. I ultimately think that belief is a step below. It's not the greatest momentum builder. I think like there's 4 levels, and number 1, there's certain things people need to happen, and I almost term this as like desperation. Like I gotta have it. I gotta have this. I gotta have this. I gotta get the A. I gotta get the state title to like validate who I am, and blah 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 blah. And then there's hoping, wishing, wanting, right? And I think that's just
Yep.
a slightly above like desperation. It's like, man, like I really hope that could happen. Man, I really wish, or I would want X, Y, and Z. And then I think where people make the mistake too is like only to go to belief instead of like knowing that they're good enough. And I think the greats whether they realize it or not, that's subconsciously, that's where they live. It's just like, I know, right? Like if you look at like the Kobe's, the MJ's, the Brady's of the world, it's like, even when they come up short, right? It's like, I still know how good I am. I still know I'm the greatest ever. And the example I give is I usually like be in a room with kids, whoever. And I'm like, how old are you? And they're like, 20. I'm like, are you sure you're 20? And they're like, well, yeah. I'm like, would you bet me $1 million you're 20? And they're like every single day. I'm like, yeah, you didn't answer the question. Well, I believe I'm 20, right? There's like an underlining bit of doubt within that. And so it's getting them to help them. And I think this circles back to not only identity, but leadership and culture, because it's like, you have to know what those things are. Like, I can't just kind of like hope and wish and want them to happen. I can't believe that like somebody's going to come in and, like you said, sprinkle the fairy dust of like, make things all better. It's like, somebody has to take charge and get people to buy in. Like, even if I tell people all this time, no matter what I tell you, if you think I believe what I'm saying is true, then you'll believe it, right? Like at the end of the day, that's the most important part of it. And I'm sure you experience that, especially in the military too. It's like, you could probably in the back of your mind be like, I don't know what the fuck is going to happen with this. But if you're like, if I can convince these guys, like this is the best way, this is the route we have to go, then it gives us the best opportunity to win, complete a mission, whatever it is.
Right. Well, and that goes back to what you control and what you measure and what you're doing, right? Like if you set any again, athletes, whether it's the military, whatever, you sit down with somebody, they have a big goal, they have a big dream. All right. It's easy to go in and say, yeah, I'm gonna crush this person. You know, we know wrestling well. I'm gonna crush this person. Why? Because he sucks. He has no accolades, he has no whatever. Oh, now you're going up against the returning national champ. Can you beat this guy? Well, I don't know. Well, hold on. What do you think what time do you get up in the morning? 5. What do you do? I work hard. I go at it. I lift, I wrestle, I hit my moves. Okay. What does he do? Well, he probably gets up. When? I don't know. 5. Okay. And what does he do? He lifts, he wrestles, he works out. You build that confidence, you build that belief again with those little daily habits, those things that you do control, whether or not you go in and win that match or win that competition, get that promotion or whatever. If you have done all those things, there's no reason to not have the confidence. You know, I mean, even being at West Point, again, I didn't have full confidence by the time I finally got into a starting role. You know, we go out and wrestling against Oklahoma State, and like in my mind, I'm like, yeah, we can compete. And then in the back of my mind, it's, well, these guys are in, you know, half the number of credit hours as us, and they have all this extra time to work out and all this extra thing, and you know, they have
stories.
Coaching. Yeah, and you tell yourself these things, right? There were a couple guys on our team that won. Well, why did they win and why did I not go in? Maybe I didn't build the right confidence. Maybe I didn't do the right things. But if you do those right things, why should you think that you're not capable of doing what someone else was capable of doing? Maybe doing even more. You know, well, I'm not the athlete. Okay, well, have you put in the work? Maybe you're not, but maybe if you can tell yourself and you know that you have worked harder than that person that is a better athlete, then you caught up to them.
Well, it's interesting that like confidence is one of those things so many people lack, and how much confidence, like we basically put everybody else on a pedestal. It's like we make them out to be the greatest thing ever and really diminish like anything that we've done, like anything. It's interesting. One of the like assignments I've given so many people over the last like week or two is like, you need to text me like 3 things that are unique about yourself, right? Like to kind of like, because if I can get it at the forefront of your mind, then I feel like right, I always say it's like, if you read nutrition books, you tend to live like healthier at that time. Why? Because it's just at the forefront, right? You read a book on how to save money, you tend to save money at that time, right? So it's like, if I can keep these things, what makes me unique? What did I do? Like you're saying is like, if I can build those stories in my own mind, then like ultimately it's like, nope, nobody can hold a candle to me. And I stop putting everybody on a pedestal. And then like you said, where we came from, it was based off of like what state you wrestled in, and like, and you get to college and it's like, people look at the uniforms and like what school they're from. And it's like, dude, like you want people to respect and believe in you, but like you have to do it for yourself first. And that's not putting everybody else on a pedestal.
That's 100%. I mean, and again, just even the attitude, the mentality. Like I knew within our state, and I felt like even on a national level, like the way that I prepped and worked and good decisions, you lose that confidence when you can't answer yourself, when you can't answer those questions the right way. Did I manage my nutrition? No, I didn't. Well, now I'm starting to lose some confidence.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
didn't prep this way. I didn't get those extra practices in. I mean, I remember, going to the finals senior year and like looking across during the introductions and all that. Like I saw that guy, I was like, man, this dude hadn't been out doing what I did all summer. This guy hadn't been doing what I did, all 4 years of high school and doing all this. I'm like, and you go in the mentality, like, I'm not going to let you take that. And then you look
Yeah.
at where I was, again, different level, you know, uh, fast forward a couple of years, you start getting these voices in your head and kind of get fed some of this stuff. It's like, man, I'm at Army. We don't have the time to do what some of these guys have to do. And they were already more highly recruited out of high school than me. And you start doubting stuff, and you go from going in and dominating people to, having a 500 record in college, about where I was. And it's like, well, if I could change anything, yeah, I'd go back and I'd change that. But the only thing I can say that I would dwell on is the fact if I didn't let that make me better, so now when I'm coaching and helping out and doing things, hey, don't let that get to you. Don't be that person that allows, like you said, to put somebody else on a pedestal or think that you don't belong. Now, if you didn't do all those daily habits, those things you control, those things that you measure, maybe you should put other people on pedestal because they are
Yeah.
doing those right things,
Yeah.
And so only you can really answer that. And like you said, some of that is having that desire to want to be the best and to want to be. And at the end of the day, you want to always win. You want to always be the best. You want to be the one to get that promotion or whatever it is. But you don't control that all the time. You control the way you prep and the way you go in and compete for those things. And if you can go in and compete to the best you possibly could, nobody ever looks themselves in the mirror, even 10 years, 20 years down the road, I think, and says, I regret waking up early and doing those things. I regret taking the hard, doing the hard things and taking the right steps. I regret picking up that piece of trash because I felt like it somehow factor into everything I did and the whole mentality of how I look at things. Because doing that is going to make me hit that move in the wrestling room right, even if it takes 1,000 times to get it.
Yeah.
And so nobody regrets, because that's, again, when you talk about identity, that's who you become. Whether or not you get to hang a plaque on your wall that says you're a national champ or not, or whatever it is, Bobby down the road got the promotion and I didn't. Well, you know what? I don't care. I did everything that I could have to be there with it. I can live with that. And if you can't live with it, maybe somebody else sees your talent, sees your ability, and you get the promotion elsewhere. And
Yeah. It's interesting too is where did I read this? I forget I saw this the other day, and it's like something, a kind of a message that I've been like harping on a little bit too is, well, two things. One is I think in our world, you might be the opposite, but like I try not to use the word goals, especially with like 20-year-olds, because I feel
Mhm.
like the moment you're like, hey, we're gonna goal set, they're like, I don't fucking care. Like,
Yeah.
great. So it's interesting is I don't know what word you use. I've come to I use the word mission now, right? Like what's your mission for the season? Like what's your dream outcome? What is it that, like, if you had a magic wand and you could like poof one thing that you like, the overarching thing that you want, like what is that you want for yourself, like individually as well as the team? And then on top of that, like, don't worry about, again, going back to goals, don't worry about like short-term goals along the way. Is I read this somewhere is like, don't set goals, set habits, right? Like, and
Yep.
if I know my mission and I know my dream outcome of what I want, what are those? Like, I'm just gonna set habits along the way, and it might tweak and change along the way, but I don't like goals are, I think going back to measuring, it's like that's a good like measuring stick. Like maybe along the way, it's like a checkpoint, right? Like, did I accomplish X to fulfill long-term mission, whether that's a year, 6 months, whatever it is. Because I actually use, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like when I talk to them, I'm like, but it's kind of like, it is kind of like the military in the sense of like, they have a mission, and yeah, there's might be a plan and like a process of what you think is the way to get that, but that shit can go astray anytime. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I just got to figure out where I am and how do I get back on track. So it's like, I don't have to like freak out. I think people, it's like they have this huge dream, big outcome, this big goal, and they set all these little goals, and like maybe they don't accomplish the first one or two small goals. And so they're just like, screw it. Like now everything's toast. Now I'm never going to be able to get there. And it's like, well, maybe, but like maybe not. Like, don't get so hung up on this little goal that you think was wildly important when it's the mission that you're after, right? Like, it's just
Yeah.
like kind of going back to your story of like when you were in Ranger school, it's like at the beginning, it was like, okay, here's what we're going to do. And then by the end, it's like, everybody drop your shit and run.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think too, like you said, goals, it's kind of a ambiguous thing sometimes, right? And like I was a big goal setter in high school, and I still have goals, plans, if you want to call them that, visions.
Yeah.
But like I was a big goal setter, and ironically enough, like going into my ninth grade year, I just wanted to start on varsity. And part of it was I thought it would be cool to be on a varsity team as a freshman. And they had nicer singlets back in the day. We had the old cotton ones that would ride up, and these had the gripper legs. I was like, oh man, those are cool. And like I way outdid that. So going into college, it was like, oh, I'm going to go be an All-American. That's my goal. But like BYOB, did I really believe in that? Did I really? I wanted to be it, but was I willing to do the things I needed to do to get there? And the answer, the short answer was kind of like a no. The short answer was no. And so, clearly I never got there. So we've been talking about the identity thing. And the light switch for me, kind of happened around the time I brushed my hand and all. It was screw trying to say that I want to be this college All-American. I still want to be one. Sure. Everybody wants to be one. But what do I really want for myself? Who do I want to be? And like I decided I just want to be tough. Like when I go out, whether I don't even get on the starting roster or I'm wrestling in an open, like I want people to be like, dang, who the hell is that Army guy? Like he was tough. Like I didn't just go out and pound the dude. Like he was going at me all three periods. I was even up by like 7 points in third period. That dude's just coming at me. Like that's what I decided I wanted, and that's what I was able to kind of build that identity around. Well, how do I get tough? I have to do the right things in practice. I have to do the right things to get myself ready. You look at the Army. Like I told guys all the time, we're going on a patrol. Like you could be attacked at any point, right? Who are the bad guys going to go after? Are they going to go after the people that are walking around looking like they don't know where they're going? They don't have their gear on right. Or are they going to go after the guys that look like if I go after these dudes, they're going to motor me and I'm going to get smoked. And so at the end of the day, you train to be ready. You train to be tough, to look tough, all those things. But it's like, you're not going to come at us. Now sometimes they can't tell who's inside maybe a vehicle. And then we hop out and they're like, oh, dang, God, I messed with the wrong dudes.
Yeah.
But like, that's part of it. And then you develop an identity, even with like your unit. Like the unit I was in was part of the Thunder runs, going into Baghdad. Obviously, I was still a high school kid, but like people in Baghdad, my first deployment, like they knew the patch. They saw the patch and they'd like point at it. And I'm like, yeah. So what those guys did, like, yeah, you don't want none of that. Yeah, even though it was like, it was like 7 years later, 7 years later, but like you develop that. And we went in, I wasn't part of the group yet during the Thunder runs. Like I said, I was still a high school kid, but I'm sure they didn't go in and say, hey, yeah, let's just mildly go in and do this. They were like, let's go in and wreck some stuff, do what we need to do. And you get that reputation, but like, again, like why did you Ranger school? Well, partly was don't touch the stove, but you want to be associated with that because not everybody, there's always 100 guys trying out to even get the spot. And then you get there and there's always 100 more guys dropping out for whatever reason, maybe some of their own accord, maybe not, but you want that because it's special and you associate to that thing. We talked about doing the hard things. I look at when we were in high school, we were Buccaneers, but we wear the skull and crossbones singlet in the finals. You don't get to wear it if you don't make it to the finals. I'm sorry if you failed to get the finals.
Yeah.
You don't wear it until you're in the finals or in the medal round, and it means something. You do extra in practice so that you can wear that singlet and represent that group in that way. It's not just given, and it's an honor to be able to wear that, and so it kind of just goes with that whole identity thing.
Yeah. So kind of wrapping things up is what would be, you can go either route, like you can go leadership or you can go culture. Like what would be the number one? I always say like with those things, there are there's different ways to lead and there's different cultures to build, but I think that there's always like some underlining like irrefutable principles that must be understood and followed on either side of the equation. So what would one of those like irrefutable principles be on leadership or culture for any coach to understand?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, and you build culture through leadership. So they're kind of one and the same. I
Yeah.
mean, your organization is going to be a reflection of how you treat people and what you measure and what you value, what you emphasize. If you're always emphasizing the negative, your team's going to have a negative vibe. If you're always emphasizing the doom and gloom, or if all you're emphasizing is the winning, the money making, the championships, that's all they're going to care about. And you could have them go out and compete. Say again, you deal with so many coaches. They go out and compete, and because they don't win, I failed.
Yeah.
Well, did you do all those things that you needed to do? Did you wake up early? Did you hit all those practices? Did you manage your nutrition? Did you do these things? Business world, did you measure, were you doing the daily things that you are supposed to do? If you did all of those things as a leader, are you still going to tell people you failed? Is that failure? I mean, how do you define success? Success is building that identity and doing those things. So, I mean, if there's just a single one thing, and I kind of hit on it earlier, as a leader, the way that you lead, the way that you develop culture, yes, it involves managing those things, measuring those things, doing those things, what you emphasize, how you react to things. If you're always arguing with the referee, if you're always arguing with the next level manager or griping about the stock market or whatever, that's what your people are going to do. Even subconsciously, they may be like, man, my leader's kind of a negative, D-bag, but like they're still going to think those things because they see you thinking those things. I've been guilty of that sometimes, whether it's
for
the
sure.
Army or wherever, but it's how do you feel about your people and what is your attitude toward them and toward what you're going after? And if you don't manage your attitude toward your team, toward your people, I said it before, if you don't care about their development, and seeing them do those right things and seeing them reach their max potential, you maybe need to lead something else. Maybe you need to lead something that just is in a different way. Again, maybe if you're a head coach of something, you need to step back and just be a technique or a position coach. If you're a manager over people, maybe you need to get into a functional area where you just manage numbers. You just manage things, and that doesn't mean that you can't change and evolve and realize, hey, people do matter. And I can reinvent myself to make myself care. I don't know the answer to that. There's not like I care about people button that you can hit. But at the end of the day, I mean, that's what it's about. And it really doesn't matter. I mean, I could say I like my job, I like what I do, but I care more about seeing people develop and see people remove their barriers and get better at what they do. I care way more about that than I care about the actual technical stuff to it, And so that would be the one thing is how you care about and treat people. And I, on a broader scale, I guess that's your attitude. What's your attitude toward your people and toward what you're going after? And that's it.
Well, awesome, man. I appreciate it. And, I think that, like I said, is you definitely have so much knowledge and wisdom on both sides of it, especially when the costs are greatest, obviously, literally life and death, all the way down to now, like you said, is settling disputes, between people about is the water cold enough?
Shift change, yeah. Shift change is a big one.
So, well, awesome, man. I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing stories, knowledge, wisdom with us. And like I tell you guys all the time, hopefully is the idea is just to be able to take one thing away, one thing that you can actually use, one thing that you can actually implement. You don't have to remember everything, but what is that golden nugget for you that you can go out and start building the team, start having the success, the culture, the leadership, the attitude, the focus that you want. With that being said, love you guys. Talk to you soon.